The first thing Jake Morrison felt was cold. Not the gentle cool of morning air, but the bone-deep freeze that came from being stored like a piece of meat for 20 years. His eyes opened slowly, fighting against the frost that had formed on his eyelashes. The cryopod's lid lifted with a soft hiss, and warm air rushed over his naked body. Jake tried to sit up, but his muscles refused to obey. 20 years of sleep had turned his body into something weak and shaky. He managed to roll onto his side and cough up the blue fluid that filled his lungs. The taste was bitter and metallic, like licking a battery. He had done this before during training, but it never got easier. The ship's lights were dim, casting long shadows across the medical bay. Jake could see 5 other cryopods lined up against the wall. Their status lights were dark, dead. His team had not made it through the long journey. Dr. Katie Brooks, the engineer, Captain Dan Miller, the pilot, Scientist Mary Lopez, and Sam Wright, all gone. Jake forced himself to stand on wobbly legs. His skin was pale and covered in goosebumps. The ship's computer had left a standard medical robe hanging nearby. He pulled it on and tried to remember how to walk properly. Each step felt like learning to move all over again. "Computer," he said, his voice coming out as a croak. "Status report." A woman's voice filled the room. It was Dr. Lisa Carter's voice, recorded before the mission began. She had been the project leader back on Earth, the one who sent them on this journey to the stars. "Welcome back, Commander Morrison. You've been in cryo sleep for 20 years. For months and 16 days, we have arrived at the Kepler 442 system." Jake nodded and shuffled toward the wall panel. His reflection in the dark screen showed a man who looked older than his 45 years. His brown hair was now streaked with gray, and deep lines marked his face. 20 years of cryo sleep aged a person in strange ways. "Why am I the only one awake?" Jake asked. "What happened to the others?" Cryopod failures occurred at various points during the journey. Dr. Brooks' pod failed in year 5. Captain Miller's pod failed in year 12. The others failed in years 15 and 17. You're the sole survivor of the expedition. The words hit Jake like a punch to the stomach. He had trained with these people for 3 years. We're supposed to build humanity's first research station in this system together. Now he was alone, more alone than any human had ever been. The nearest human was light years away. Jake made his way to the ship's main corridor. The UES Horizon was a big ship, designed to carry a crew of 50 people and enough supplies to build a small colony. His bare feet made soft sounds on the metal floor as he walked toward the bridge. The bridge was dark, except for the glow of computer screens. Jake sat in the captain's chair and activated the main display. Space spread out before him, filled with stars he had never seen from Earth. A yellow sun burned in the center of the screen, and he could see several planets orbiting around it. "Computer, show me communication logs from Earth." "Accessing communication logs." There was a pause. "Last communication from Earth received 15 years, 7 months ago. Message was a routine supply manifest for the next cargo shipment." Jake felt his heart stop. 15 years? Show me the message. The screen flickered, and a face appeared. It was Director William Hayes from Earth Command, a man Jake had met several times before the mission. Hayes looked tired and worried.
"Horizon.
Expedition. This is Earth Command. We are sending supply drop coordinates as planned. However, I must inform you that we are experiencing some communication difficulties with our outer colonies. Mars went dark 3 weeks ago. We've lost contact with Luna Base and Titan Station. We don't know what's happening, but we're investigating. Stay on mission and await further instructions." The message ended. Jake stared at the empty screen for a long time. Mars going dark was impossible. The Mars colonies had over 2 million people. Luna Base was humanity's oldest off-world settlement. Titan Station was their main fuel depot for deep space missions. Computer scan for any other human ships or signals in this system. Scanning. The computer's sensors swept across space. No human vessels or signals detected in the Kepler 442 system. Jake stood up and walked to the large window that looked out into space. The planet they were supposed to study was a blue and green world that looked like Earth. It was perfect for human life. With the right temperature and atmosphere, they were going to name it New Eden. Computer, scan the planet's surface. Look for any signs of technology or structures. The sensors focused on the planet below, detecting multiple artificial structures on the surface. Architecture appears to be non-human in origin. Estimated population of structures, 3 million individual buildings. Jake's blood turned cold. Non-human? Show me. The screen changed to show images of the planet's surface. Strange cities covered the continents, built in patterns that hurt to look at. The buildings were tall and twisted, like metal trees reaching toward the sky. Ships moved between the cities, but they were not human ships. They were sleek and silver, shaped like knives. Computer, are these structures recent? Analysis indicates construction began approximately 14 years ago. Most recent structures are less than 1 year old. Jake sat back down in the captain's chair. The timeline was becoming clear, and it was horrible. 15 years ago, Earth had started losing contact with its colonies. 14 years ago, aliens had started building cities on the planet humans were supposed to colonize. The connection was obvious and terrifying. Computer scanned for alien ships in the system. Scanning complete. Detecting 312 alien vessels. Ship types include carriers, destroyers, cruisers, and support craft. Fleet appears to be using this system as a staging area. Jake felt sick. 300 ships. His single research vessel was facing an entire alien fleet, but he had to know more, had to understand what had happened to humanity. Computer, can you analyze the alien ship designs? Compare them to any database information we have about known alien species. Analyzing. Ship design matches theoretical models for Zephyrian Dominion vessels. The Zephyrians are a militaristic species known for territorial expansion and conquest. Of younger civilizations, Jake remembered the Zephyrians from his briefings. They were reptile-like creatures that had been expanding their empire for over 1,000 years. Intelligence reports suggested they destroyed any species they considered a threat. Humanity had hoped to avoid contact with them for at least another century. Computer, access my personal files. What was my occupation before joining this mission? Commander, Jake Morrison. Former United States Marine Corps, Force Reconnaissance. Served in the Martian colonial wars, specialist in guerrilla warfare and deep reconnaissance. Volunteered for Deep Space Program after medical discharge following the loss of his reconnaissance unit. Jake closed his eyes and remembered. The caves of Mars, his team of 12 Marines, trapped behind enemy lines during the rebellion. He had been the only one to make it out alive, carrying intel that ended the war. The nightmares had followed him for years after that. Now he was alone again, but this time the stakes were much higher. If the Zephyrians had destroyed Earth and all human colonies, then he might be the last human being alive in the universe. The weight of that possibility pressed down on him like a mountain. Jake opened his eyes and looked out at the alien fleet. They were spread across the system like a finfection, using humanity's planned home as their own base. The anger that had been building inside him since he woke up began to burn hotter. Computer, is the ship's weapon system functional? The Horizon is a research vessel. Primary weapons include mining lasers and defensive railguns. Now, systems are operational. Jake smiled for the first time since waking up. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a soldier who had found his enemy. Then let's see what these aliens think of human hospitality. Jake spent the next 3 days learning how to be human again. His muscles slowly remembered their strength, and his mind began to clear from the fog of cryo sleep. He ate protein bars and drank recycled water, while studying everything the ship's computers could tell him about the alien fleet. The Zephyrians had turned the system into a military base. Their ships moved in careful patterns between the planets, following routes that made sense for a species that had conquered dozens of worlds. They were organized, disciplined, and completely confident that no threat could reach them here. Jake sat in the bridge, watching the alien ships through the long-range cameras. The Zephyrians looked like walking lizards, but bigger and meaner than any Earth reptile. They stood on 2 legs like humans, but their skin was covered in scales that shimmered green and brown. Their heads were long and narrow, filled with sharp teeth. Computer, how long have these aliens been in human space? Jake asked. Based on intercepted communications, the Zephyrian fleet entered human territory approximately 16 years ago. They began with attacks on outer colonies and worked their way toward Earth. Jake felt his hands clench into fists. 16 years? That meant the aliens had been killing humans for over a decade before he even went into cryo sleep. Mars, Luna, Titan, Europa, all the worlds where humans had built new lives. All gone. Show me their communication patterns. I want to understand how they coordinate their fleet. The computer displayed a web of signals connecting the alien ships. Most of the messages came from a massive carrier at the center of the fleet. It was 3 times larger than any other ship, covered in communication dishes and weapon batteries. That's their command ship, Jake said. Take that out, and the rest of the fleet becomes confused. Jake had learned this lesson in the caves of Mars. Cut off the head, and the body dies. The Martian rebels had made the mistake of centralizing their command structure. Jake's unit had taken out their main communication hub, and the entire rebellion had collapsed within hours. But first, he needed to understand the enemy better. Jake accessed the ship's probe system. The Horizon carried 20 reconnaissance drones, designed to survey planets and asteroid fields. Each probe was the size of a basketball, equipped with cameras, sensors, and a small engine. Computer-modified probe programming for stealth reconnaissance. I want to get close to that command ship without being detected. Modifying probe systems. Stealth mode activated. Probe will use passive sensors only and maintain minimum safe distance of 50 kilometers. Jake launched the first probe toward the alien fleet. It would take 6 hours to reach the command ship, moving slowly to avoid detection. While he waited, Jake explored the rest of the horizon, looking for anything that might help him fight an entire alien army. The ship's engineering section was where Dr. Katie Brooks had worked. Her personal laboratory was still sealed, filled with experimental equipment and half-finished projects. Jake found her personal logs and began reading through them. Katie had been brilliant. The kind of engineer who saw possibilities where others saw problems. Her notes described dozens of modifications to the ship's systems, ways to squeeze more power from the engines, improvements to the life support systems, and something else that made Jake's heart race. Project Thunderbolt, he read aloud. Experimental fusion drive weaponization. By redirecting the fusion reaction and channeling it through the ship's hull, the Horizon could become a massive kinetic projectile. The ship would be destroyed in the process, but it could punch through almost any armor. Jake continued reading. Katie had been working on this project during the journey, using the ship's fabrication systems to build prototype components. She had gotten far enough to test the basic concept before her cryopod failed. Brooks' experimental components. Are they still functional? Scanning engineering section. Located experimental fusion redirect system. Components are 60% complete and appear functional. Jake smiled. Katie had given him a weapon, even in death. But he would need time to finish her work, and time was something he didn't have much of. The alien fleet would eventually detect the Horizon, especially if he started making major modifications to the ship's systems. The probe reached the alien command ship and began its reconnaissance. Jake watched the data stream in, building a detailed picture of the enemy flagship. It was enormous, over 2 kilometers long, with multiple hangar bays and weapon arrays. The ship's hull was covered in strange symbols that might have been writing or decorations. Look for weak points. Analysis complete. Alien vessel appears to have heavy forward armor, but lighter protection on the ventral hull. Primary weapon systems are concentrated in the forward section. Propulsion systems are located at the rear of the vessel. Jake nodded. The Zephyrians built their ships like hammers, designed to smash through enemy defenses with overwhelming firepower. But hammers were clumsy weapons, and Jake had learned to fight with knives. The probe's sensors picked up something else. Communication signals from the command ship were not just going to other ships in the fleet. Some signals were being sent to deep space, toward other star systems. Where are they going? Signals are directed toward the Andromeda Galaxy. Based on signal strength and frequency, they appear to be status reports to a higher command authority. Jake felt his stomach drop. This fleet was not the entire Zephyrian military. It was just one battle group, reporting to an even larger force somewhere in deep space. Humanity had not just been attacked by an alien army, they had been attacked by an alien empire. Computer, can you decode any of the alien transmissions? Partial translation available? Alien language database was included in the expedition files, translating recent transmissions. Text appeared on the screen, rough translations of alien communications. Jake read through them, his anger growing with each line. Sector 7 pacification complete. Human resistance eliminated. Preparing staging area for Andromeda assault. Recommend immediate resource extraction from human worlds. Confirmed. Begin harvesting operations on the third planet. Useful materials include water, rare metals, and biological specimens. What about the human population centers? Several cities remain intact. Unnecessary. Humans have been classified as extinct. Remaining population centers are negligible threat. Jake's hand shook as he read the messages. The aliens talked about humanity like they were discussing pest control. Entire cities full of people, dismissed as negligible. His home world, his species. Reduced to a line item in a military report, the probe sent back more data, including images from inside the command ship. Jake could see Zephyrian officers moving. Through the corridors, their scaled skin reflecting the ship's lights. They carried weapons that looked like rifles, but with strange crystal components that glowed with internal energy. One image made Jake's blood boil. In what appeared to be the ship's trophy room, he could see objects taken from conquered worlds. A human flag hung on the wall next to alien artifacts. Below it, displayed like museum pieces, were personal items from Earth: a child's stuffed animal, a wedding ring, a photograph of a family. Computer, how many humans were estimated to be? Living in all colonies combined? Total human population across all colonies was approximately 4 billion individuals. 4 billion people. Jake had known the number before, but it had just been a statistic. Now, staring at the trophy room, he understood what it meant. 4 billion lives, each one a person with hopes and dreams and families. All gone because these scaled monsters wanted to expand their empire. Jake stood up from the console and walked to the ship's armory. The Horizon carried standard ship security weapons, designed to handle pirates or equipment failures. Pistols, rifles, and a few heavy weapons for extreme situations. It was not enough to fight an alien army, but it was a start. Next, Jake visited the ship's fabrication bay. The Horizon's manufacturing systems were designed to build replacement parts and scientific equipment. But with the right programming, they could build other things too. To the ship's mining equipment, turning peaceful tools into weapons of war. The probe continued its reconnaissance mission, mapping the alien fleet's patrol patterns and communication schedules. Jake watched the data, looking for weaknesses and opportunities. The Zephyrians were powerful, but they were also predictable. They followed standard military procedures, the kind that worked well against conventional enemies. Jake was not a conventional enemy. He was a Force Recon Marine with nothing left to lose, and 20 years of suppressed grief to fuel his anger. The aliens had made one critical mistake. They had assumed humanity was extinct, but they had missed one human, and that human was about to remind them why his species had conquered their own world before reaching for the stars. I want them ready for combat operations. Acknowledged. Beginning manufacturing process. Estimated completion time, 18 hours. Jake looked out at the alien fleet, spread across the system like a disease. Soon they would learn what it meant to face the fury of Earth's last sun. Jake waited until the alien fleet entered their rest cycle. His probe had been watching their patterns for 5 days, and the Zephyrians followed a strict schedule. For 6 hours every day, most of their ships powered down to minimum systems. While the crews slept, it was the only time their guard was down. The modifications to the Horizon were complete. Jake had turned the peaceful research ship into something that would have made his old Marine unit proud. The mining drones now carried explosive charges instead of or collectors. The ship's fabrication systems had built 20 railgun projectiles from processed metal, or, most importantly, Dr. Katie Brooks's fusion weapon system was ready. Jake sat in the pilot's seat, his hands steady on the controls. He had not felt this calm since before his unit died on Mars. The anger was still there. It's burning in his chest like a furnace. But it was controlled now, focused. He was no longer Jake Morrison, the researcher. It was Sergeant Morrison, Force Recon. And he had a job to do. Computer. Begin stealth approach to target zone. Keep us in the shadow of the gas giant's moon. The horizon moved like a ghost through space. Its engines ran at minimum power, producing almost no heat signature. Jake had learned this trick during the Martian War, when his unit had to move past rebel sensors without being detected. The key was patience and careful planning. His first target was not the command ship. That would come later. But Jake needed to blind the alien fleet before he struck at their heart. The Zephyrians had sensor stations scattered throughout the system. It's automated platforms that watched for any signs of trouble. Take out the sensors, and the fleet would be flying blind. The first sensor station hung in space like a metal spider, its long arms covered with detection equipment. Jake's probe had identified it as a critical node in the alien surveillance network. Destroy this one, and a whole section of the system would go dark. Jake released the first modified mining drone. It accelerated toward the sensor station, its engine silent and its hull painted black to avoid visual detection. The drone carried a fusion charge, a small version of the bombs that had ended wars on Earth, against an unarmored sensor station. It would be like using a sledgehammer to crush an egg. The explosion lit up space for just a moment, a brief star that faded quickly in the vacuum. The sensor station simply vanished, turned into glowing debris that scattered in all directions. On the alien command ship, warning lights would be flashing, but they would not know what had caused the explosion. Jake was already moving toward the second target, another sensor station, this one guarding the approach to the main fleet. Second drone performed perfectly, turning the station into scrap metal and radiation. Now the Zephyrians had 2 blind spots in their defensive network. The third target was different. It was not a sensor station, but a small patrol ship, one of a dozen that circled the fleet's perimeter. Jake needed to test his weapons against actual alien armor before he faced their bigger ships. This time, Jake used the Horizon's modified mining laser. The weapon had originally been designed to cut through asteroid rock, but Jake had increased its power and focused its beam. The laser struck the patrol ship's hull and burned through it like a knife through paper. The alien ship tried to turn and fight back, but Jake was ready. The Horizon's railgun fired a metal projectile at incredible speed. The slug punched through the patrol ship's armor and exploded inside, tearing the vessel apart from within. Jake watched the alien crew's life support systems fail and felt nothing but satisfaction. Now, the alien fleet knew they were under attack, but they still did not know where the attacks were coming from. Jake had used the gas giant's magnetic field to mask his ship's energy signature, and the destroyed sensor stations had created gaps in their detection network. To the Zephyrians, their attacker was invisible. Admiral Vexera, the fleet commander, appeared on the alien communication channels. Jake's computer translated her angry words as she ordered her ships to search for the threat. Her voice was harsh and full of clicks and hissing sounds that reminded Jake of angry snakes. All ships, combat formation. Unknown enemy vessel is operating in this system. Search pattern Delta 7. Find them and destroy them. He watched the alien fleet scramble into action. They were moving like they expected to fight another fleet, spreading out into battle formations that would work well against conventional enemies. But Jake was not fighting a conventional battle. He was hunting, picking off targets one by one. The fourth target was a supply ship, fat and slow as it carried fuel and ammunition to the other vessels. Jake approached from below, using the ship's own bulk to hide his approach. Modified mining drones swarmed over the supply ship like angry bees, their explosives turning the vessel into an expanding cloud of fire and debris. The explosion was much bigger this time. The supply ship had been carrying fusion fuel, and when the drones breached the storage tanks, the resulting blast could be seen from the other side of the system. 3 nearby alien ships were caught in the explosion and badly damaged. Jake was already gone, sliding back into the shadow of the gas giant before the aliens could react. Their sensors showed nothing but empty space where the attack had come from. The Zephyrians began firing their weapons at shadows, wasting ammunition on targets that did not exist. Computer, analyze alien response patterns. How are they adapting? To our attacks? Alien fleet has adopted defensive posture. They are grouping their ships closer together and increasing patrol frequency. However, they are still following standard tactical doctrine. Jake nodded. The Zephyrians were doing exactly what he expected. They were treating this like a normal space battle, trying to protect their valuable ships by keeping them close together. But that just made them easier targets for his next surprise. Jake had been saving his modified mining drones for this moment. 20 autonomous weapons, each one programmed with targeting data from his reconnaissance. They launched from the horizon in all directions, spreading out like the petals of a deadly flower. The drones were small and fast. It's much smaller than the patrol ships the aliens were watching for. By the time the Zephyrian sensors detected them, it was too late. The drones dove into the alien formation like suicidal birds, each one seeking a specific target. The explosions came one after another, a chain of destruction that rippled through the alien fleet. A destroyer lost its main engine and began spinning out of control. Cruisers' weapon systems exploded, turning the ship into a helpless target. A carrier's hangar bay erupted in flames as stored fighter craft caught fire. Jake watched the chaos through his long-range cameras and felt a cold satisfaction. This was for Earth, for Mars, for Luna, for all the human children, who would never grow up because of these monsters. But the aliens were learning. Admiral Vexthera's voice cut through the communication channels again, her orders sharp and angry. The remaining ships began moving in new patterns, covering each other with overlapping fields of fire. They had figured out that their enemy was using small, fast weapons. Computer enemy casualties so far: 37 alien vessels destroyed or disabled. Enemy fleet strength reduced by approximately 12%. It was a good start. But Jake knew the easy part was over. The Zephyrians would be ready for his tricks now. They would adapt their tactics, spread out their formations, and make his job much harder. The real battle was just beginning. Jake looked at the modified fusion weapon system that Dr. Katie Brooks had designed. He had been hoping to save it for the command ship, but the situation was changing faster than he had planned. The aliens were getting smarter, and soon they would find a way to detect his ship. "All right, Katie," Jake said to the empty bridge. "Let's see if your crazy idea actually works." He began powering up the fusion weapon system, feeling the ship's hull vibrate as massive amounts of energy flowed through circuits that had never been designed to handle such power. The horizon was about to become something it was never meant to be: a weapon of war. The alien fleet was reforming, their ships moving into a new defensive pattern. They thought they were safe now, protected by their numbers and their superior firepower. They had no idea that Jake Morrison was just getting started in the distance. The command ship sat at the center of the formation like a queen surrounded by her guards. Jake could see Admiral Vexthera's flagship through his cameras, its hull gleaming with alien metal and covered with the symbols of a dozen conquered worlds. Soon, very soon, that ship would burn. The Zephyrian response was swift and brutal. Admiral Vexthera had learned from Jake's first attacks and changed her tactics completely. Instead of keeping the fleet together in defensive formations, she scattered her ships across the system. In hunting packs, each group had fast attack ships, heavy cruisers, and sensor platforms working together to find and destroy the lone human vessel. Jake watched the alien ships spread out like a net, covering every possible hiding spot in the system. They moved with purpose now. No longer the overconfident predators who had underestimated their prey. The Admiral was smart. Jake had to give her that. She understood that fighting an invisible enemy required new strategies. Computer, analyze the new alien formation patterns. How long before they find us? Based on current search patterns, the horizon will be detected within 4 hours. Recommend immediate relocation to alternate hiding position. Jake shook his head. No, we're not running anymore. Time to change the rules of engagement. He had spent the last 2 days preparing for this moment. The asteroid belt between the system's third and fourth planets was rich with rocky debris, some pieces as large as mountains. Jake had been busy there, using the ship's mining equipment to hollow out several asteroids and fill them with surprises. The first hunting pack found Jake's gift when they swept through the outer edge of the asteroid field. The lead ship's sensors detected metal inside what appeared to be a normal rock formation. When they moved in to investigate, the asteroid exploded with the force of a small nuclear bomb. The blast caught 2 alien ships completely by surprise. One was destroyed instantly, its hull cracked open like an egg. The other ship survived, but lost its main engines and drifted helplessly through space. Trailing atmosphere and debris, Jake had rigged 12 asteroids with fusion charges, turning each one into a mine that would wait patiently for the right target. As the alien hunting packs spread through the asteroid field, they triggered explosion after explosion, the vacuum of space filled with the brief flashes of artificial suns. But the Zephyrians were learning fast. After losing 8 ships to the asteroid mines, they began using long-range sensors to scan each rock formation before approaching. They sent small drones ahead to detonate any hidden explosives. Jake's minefield was neutralized within hours. Admiral Vexthera's voice crackled over the communication channels, her anger clear even through the computer's translation. This human fights like a coward, hiding behind tricks and traps. When we find him, I will personally tear him apart with my claws. Jake intercepted another transmission that made his blood run cold. The message was from Commander Zixamore, the Zephyrian ground forces leader, to his troops on the planet below. The computer translated the aliens' words with mechanical precision. Continue harvesting operations on the third planet. The resistance from the local population has been eliminated. Process all useful materials and prepare them for transport. Commander Zixamore out. The transmission included a data file that Jake's computer automatically downloaded. When he opened it, his hands began to shake with rage. The file contained inventory lists from Earth cataloging everything the aliens had taken from humanity's home world. Water, metals, technology, and at the bottom of the list, a section marked biological specimens and cultural artifacts. The list included items that made Jake want to scream: children's toys taken from schools, wedding rings removed from the dead, family photographs collected as examples of human social structure. To the Zephyrians, the most precious possessions of 4 billion people were just research materials. One item on the list hit Jake like a physical blow. A small stuffed bear, described as juvenile comfort object, recovered from Residential Area 7. Jake could picture a child clutching that bear, looking for comfort as the world ended around them. Now it was sitting in some alien laboratory being studied like a piece of scientific equipment. The rage that had been building inside Jake since he woke up finally boiled over. He was no longer thinking about tactics or strategy. He was thinking about revenge, pure and simple. The Zephyrians had destroyed everything he cared about and turned the remains into trophies. It was time to show them what human fury looked like. Jake activated the ship's communication system and broadcast on all frequencies, speaking in the Zephyrian language he had learned from the computer's database. His voice carried across the entire system, reaching every alien ship at once. This is Jake Morrison, the last human being in the universe. You killed my species, destroyed my world, and turned my people's memories into souvenirs. Now I'm going to kill every single one of you. It's not because it's tactically sound, not because it serves some greater purpose, but because you deserve to. Die screaming in the dark. The message had exactly the effect Jake wanted. The alien fleet stopped their organized search patterns and began converging on his position. They came in aggressive formations, weapons charged and ready for a fight. They were angry now, their discipline cracking under the pressure of fighting an enemy they could not see or understand. Jake was ready for them. He had moved the horizon to the edge of the gas giant's ring system, where billions of ice and rock particles created a natural smokescreen. The rings were dense enough to hide a ship, but thin enough to allow movement. It was perfect hunting ground for someone who knew how to use cover. The first alien squadron entered the ring system in a tight formation, their ships almost touching wingtip to wingtip. Jake let them get deep into the debris field before he struck. The Horizon's modified mining laser cut through the lead ship's armor like it was made of paper. The vessel exploded, its debris joining the natural particles of the ring. The other ships in the squadron tried to scatter, but Jake was already moving. He had studied the ring system for days, memorizing every major debris field and gravitational current. He knew exactly where the aliens would try to go. He was waiting for them. The second ship died when Jake rammed it with a piece of ring debris he had been pushing with his engines. The impact crushed the alien vessel's hull and sent it spinning into the gas giant's atmosphere. The third ship managed to fire a few shots before Jake's railgun turned it into scrap metal. More alien ships entered the ring system. But they were making mistakes now. They were angry, frustrated, and scared. Jake could hear it in their communications, the growing panic as their neat formations fell apart under pressure. These were soldiers who had conquered dozens of worlds by overwhelming weaker enemies. They had never faced a single opponent who refused to be overwhelmed. Jake used every trick he had learned in 20 years of military service. He hid behind asteroids, used debris as weapons, and turned the ring system's natural hazards against his enemies. When the aliens tried to use their superior numbers, he separated them with hit-and-run attacks. When they tried to corner him, he vanished into the ice and rock like a ghost. The battle raged for hours. Jake lost count of how many ships he destroyed. Focusing only on the next target, the next opportunity, his ship's hull was scarred by alien weapons fire. Several systems were running on backup power, but the Horizon kept fighting. Finally, Admiral Vexera herself entered the ring system with her personal escort. Jake could see her flagship. Through his cameras, a sleek predator designed for killing. The Admiral was done playing games. She wanted to face her enemy directly. Computer, scan the Admiral's ship. I want to know everything about it. Scanning complete. Vessel is heavily armored with advanced shielding systems. Primary weapons include particle beam arrays and quantum torpedoes. Ship's weak point appears to be the reactor core housing on the ventral hull. Jake studied the flagship's design and smiled grimly. The Zephyrians built their command ships to be impressive, covered with decorative armor and intimidating weapon arrays. But all that decoration created blind spots, places where a small, fast ship could hide. "All right, Admiral," Jake said to himself. "You want to dance? Let's dance." Pushed the Horizon's engines to maximum power and dove toward the flagship. Using a cluster of large asteroids as cover, the alien ship's weapons lit up space around him, but Jake was already where they thought he couldn't be. He slipped under the flagship's hull and positioned himself. Directly below the reactor housing, the mining laser fired at point-blank range, burning through the flagship's armor in seconds. Jake could see the reactor chamber through the hole, head made glowing with the blue light of contained fusion. One more shot would breach the reactor and turn the entire ship into an expanding ball of plasma. But Jake hesitated. Through the gap in the hole, he could see into the ship's interior. There was Admiral Vexera on her command bridge, her scaled face twisted with rage and fear. She was looking directly at him through the breach, their eyes meeting across the darkness of space. In that moment, Jake saw something in the alien's expression that surprised him. It was not just anger or fear, it was recognition. The Admiral understood what she was facing, perhaps for the first time. She was looking at the fury of a species that refused to die quietly. Jake's finger tightened on the firing control. Admiral would die, along with her entire ship, but not yet. First, she needed to understand exactly what she had awakened when her people destroyed humanity. The final battle began when Admiral Vexera made her last desperate move. With her flagship crippled and half her fleet destroyed, she gathered the remaining ships for one final assault. Jake watched through his cameras as over 100 alien vessels formed up in the deepest part of the ring system, using the dense debris as cover for their own ambush. The Admiral had learned from Jake's tactics. Instead of hunting him with small groups, she was forcing him to come to her. The alien ships had taken position around a massive chunk of ice and rock, one of the largest objects in the ring system. They waited in the shadows like predators, their weapons ready and their sensors scanning for any sign of the human ship. Jake knew it was a trap, but he also knew he had no choice. The Horizon was running low on ammunition and power. His mining drones were gone. His railgun had only 3 shots left. The fusion weapon system was starting to show stress fractures from repeated use. If he was going to end this war, it had to be now. But Jake had one advantage the aliens did not expect. For the past 2 days, while fighting in the ring system, he had been using the ship's gravitational sensors to map the internal structure of the largest debris chunks. He had found something interesting. One of the ice mountains was hollow inside, probably carved out by ancient impacts. More importantly, it was unstable. Jake began his approach carefully, using smaller pieces of debris as stepping stones toward the alien ambush. The Zephyrians were patient now, holding their fire until he came within range of their trap. They wanted to make sure they could finish him with one overwhelming attack. The first alien ships opened fire when Jake was still 2 kilometers away. Energy beams and missile trails lit up the darkness, turning the space around the horizon into a storm of destruction. Jake twisted and rolled between the attacks, using every piece of cover he could find. But this time, the aliens had him surrounded. Ships emerged from hiding spots all around the debris field, cutting off his escape routes. Jake's hull shuddered as alien weapons found their mark, burning through armor plating and damaging internal systems. Hull breach in Section 7, the computer reported calmly. Life support compromised. Recommend immediate evacuation. Jake ignored the warnings and pushed deeper into the trap. He needed to get close to the hollow ice mountain before his ship fell apart completely. The Horizon's engines coughed and sparked as power systems failed. But Jake kept flying toward his target. The alien ships closed in for the kill, confident that they finally had the human cornered. Admiral Vexithera's voice came over the communication. Channels transmitted from her crippled flagship by emergency relay. You fought well, human, but your species was always doomed. We have conquered 1,000 worlds and destroyed 100 civilizations. You are nothing special. Jake smiled grimly as he lined up his final shot. You're wrong about that, Admiral. Humans are very special. We're the only species crazy enough to turn our own ship into a bomb. He fired the Horizon's mining laser at the ice mountain's weak point, the place where millions of years of stress had left the structure ready to collapse. The beam burned deep into the ice, finding the hollow chamber at the mountain's heart. Then Jake triggered Dr. Katie Brooks' fusion weapon system for the last time. The explosion was unlike anything the ring system had ever seen. The fusion reaction chain reacted with the ice mountain's internal structure, turning the entire mass into an expanding shock wave of superheated gas and debris. The hollow chamber acted like a shaped charge, focusing the blast in all directions at once. The wave of destruction caught the alien ambush completely by surprise. Ships that had been hiding behind the ice mountain were crushed by house-sized chunks of debris moving at incredible speeds. Others were caught in the expanding cloud of plasma and simply vaporized. Jake's ship was thrown clear by the initial blast, tumbling end over end through space as debris rained around him. The Horizon's hull was cracked in a dozen places, and most of the ship's systems were offline. But Jake was still alive, and more importantly, so was his ship's most critical system. The emergency thrusters fired, stabilizing the Horizon's spin. Jake looked out through the cracked viewport and saw the results of his gamble. The alien ambush was gone, destroyed in a matter of seconds. Wreckage drifted through the ring system like metallic snow, all that remained of 50 Zephyrian warships. But the battle was not over. Admiral Vexthera's flagship was still functional. She had gathered the last of her ships for a final desperate assault. Jake could see them coming through the debris field, their weapons blazing as they sought revenge for their fallen comrades. Computer status report on the fusion weapon system. Fusion weapon system is offline. All mining drones expended. Railgun. Ammunition. 0 rounds remaining. Recommend immediate surrender. Jake laughed, a sound that was half humor and half hysteria. Surrender. Computer, you obviously don't understand humans very well. He looked around the battered bridge and saw something that made him smile. The emergency suit locker was still intact, and inside it was a military-grade EVA suit, the kind designed for combat operations in space. Jake had worn suits like this during the Martian War, when his unit had to assault enemy positions in the vacuum of space. Computer, prepare the remaining cryopods for emergency conversion. I need them turned into guided missiles, just like Dr. Brooks designed. Warning, converting cryopods will require manual activation. Someone must remain on board to target and fire each pod individually. Jake was already climbing into the EVA suit, checking its systems and weapon attachments. I'm not staying on board, computer. I'm going over there. The plan was simple and completely insane. Jake would convert the ship's 5 remaining cryopods into fusion-powered missiles, each one capable of punching through alien armor. He would program them to target the flagship, then use his EVA suit to board the enemy vessel. It was the kind of plan that only a desperate man with nothing to lose would attempt. The first cryopod launched just as the alien ships entered weapons range. The makeshift missile streaked through space and slammed into the flagship's forward armor, tearing a massive hole in the hull. The second pod followed seconds later, striking the ship's weapon arrays and disabling half of their guns. Admiral Vexera's ship tried to turn away, but Jake was ready for that. The third and fourth pods hit the flagship's engines, crippling the vessel's ability to maneuver. The fifth pod was aimed at the ship's hangar bay, clearing a path for Jake's boarding assault. Jake ejected from the horizon in his combat suit, using the suit's thrusters to navigate through the debris field toward the crippled flagship. Alien point defense weapons fired at him, but he was too small and fast to hit. The EVA suit's armor deflected the few shots that came close. He crashed through the breached hangar bay like a human missile, his suit's impact systems absorbing the collision. The hangar was full of smoke and emergency lights with alien crew members running in panic. Jake's rifle fired automatically, targeting anything that moved. The fighting that followed was unlike anything Jake had experienced before. The alien ship's corridors were too narrow for normal combat, forcing both sides into brutal close-quarters fighting. Jake's military training served him well, but the Zephyrians were stronger and faster than humans. It did not matter. Jake fought with the fury of his entire species, channeling 20 years of suppressed grief into every shot and every blow. He moved through the alien ship like a force of nature, leaving destruction in his wake. Admiral Vexera was waiting for him in the command center, her claws extended and her fangs bared. She was larger than the other Zephyrians, her scales scarred from a dozen previous battles. Around her lay the bodies of her bridge crew, killed in Jake's assault, so she hissed in accented English. "The last human comes to die with honor. I will make your death quick." Jake removed his helmet and looked the alien commander in the eyes. "I'm not here to die, Admiral. I'm here to deliver a message." The fight was brief and vicious. Admiral was strong and fast, but Jake had spent his entire adult life learning how to kill things that were bigger and stronger than he was. When it was over, Admiral Vexera lay bleeding on the deck of her own command center. Jake stood over her body and activated the ship's communication system. He broadcast his message on all frequencies, sending it toward the Andromeda Galaxy, where the rest of the Zephyrian Empire waited. "This is Jake Morrison, the last human being. Your fleet came to my space and killed my people. Your fleet is dead, and I'm coming for the rest of you. Tell your leaders that humanity sends its regards." He set the flagship's self-destruct system and made his way back to the hangar bay. The horizon was still functional, barely, and it had enough fuel for one more journey. Jake had studied the alien star charts, and he knew where to find the next species on the Zephyrian target list. As the alien flagship exploded behind him, Jake set course for Andromeda space. The war was over, but his mission was just beginning. Somewhere out there, other civilizations were facing the same threat that had destroyed humanity. They would need weapons, tactics, and most importantly, they would need to know that even the mightiest empire could be brought down by someone who refused to surrender.